And now I'd like to welcome to the program Sergeant Sarah Ashton-Cirillo, American journalist and, of course, in the Ukrainian Armed Forces right now. Thank you for joining us here in the studio today on TVP World. Appreciate it.
Don, it is a pleasure to be here with you and your colleagues. I've appeared several times by remote broadcast. However, before I went back to Kyiv after our trip to NATO headquarters, I couldn't be more honored to stop in and visit in person.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you here. And actually, it's a fun subject we have today as we explore hybrid warfare. We all know here in Poland how migration has been weaponized by the Belarusian Russian regimes here in Poland, but you've seen it from a slightly different guise, so let's talk about that. You went as a journalist, essentially, to report on what you saw in South America, so...
What we ran into when we were on our delegation trip to the United States in December, speaking to folks on Capitol Hill regarding Ukraine issues, over and over and over again it came up, hey, we're having issues on the southern border, as many people have heard about. And I took leave. I told my command, I said, if this issue is so important to the elected officials in the United States, we really need to understand, how is Russia involved in this? And I was given leave to go down and find out what was really happening in Latin America. I started off in what's known as the Darien Gap. It's in Panama. It separates South America from North America, and it's a massive throughway of immigrants who are crossing into North America. I also visited multiple parts of Mexico where there was incredibly large Russian influence, and the border between Guatemala and Mexico, where I was seeing child laborers being utilized to bring across immigrants from Guatemala into Mexico.
Wow. So, you know, we look at how many I'm just going to interject real quick. We look at how many different countries are coming, citizens are coming up through different countries in that area, Chinese as well, yes? But from the scope of the problem, how much could you tell were Russians like getting into the United States?
Well, that was one of the most interesting questions that was taking place, because people said, you're just trying to create a boogeyman with Russia. That's incorrect. Russia is weaponizing migration in the Americas. Russia is recruiting mercenaries in the Americas. We know this from UN officials. It hasn't been widely covered, but we know that Russia is recruiting in Mexico. We know that Russia is recruiting in Peru. We know that Russia is recruiting in Venezuela and throughout the Americas. So while they're bringing the physical fighters, their mercenaries, over to the battlefields in temporarily occupied Ukraine, they are also going ahead and stirring up what I would call terrorism in the Americas. We know for certain, and this came from the U.S. Armed Forces in a Senate committee hearing, that there are more Russian spies in Mexico than anywhere else in the world. We are also aware that at least a dozen, if not more, GER and FSB agents have been apprehended on the southern U.S. border. So this is something that we are aware of. It's just not getting the proper attention because Russia engages in chaos theory in order to cover up their hybrid aspects of warfare against Ukraine and the free world, Poland, the United States, and others.
And what is the U.S. doing about this?
Well, on the House side, the GOP-led House has acknowledged that Russia is, in fact, working with Nicaragua, working with Venezuela, working with China and others in order to destabilize the Americas. On the Senate side, the statement about the Russian spies in Mexico came at a Senate hearing. So the U.S., at least the elected officials on the Hill, are aware of this, and they're trying to work towards a solution. Now the question is, can the House, Senate, and those in the Biden administration work together to create a comprehensive way to stop this? Until that happens, Russia is going to continue to weaponize every aspect of migration, not just in the Baltics, not just in Finland, not just in Poland, but across the world, specifically in America's backyard. It has been proven. And while that's going on, they're going to continue recruiting, and they're going to continue to destabilize governments throughout that region.
Wow. It's a basic means of operation for the Russians. Well, now, I'm sure you've come across this latest article in the Financial Times talking about increased hybrid attacks here in Europe, as well as potentially using proxies to attack hard targets by the use of terrorism. So what do you make of that? What do you think we should expect here in Europe to come over the next several months and of course leading up to the European parliamentary elections.
We're going to see further manifestation of Russian terrorism against innocent civilians, not just in Ukraine, but this is what President Zelensky, this is what Colonel General Syrskyi, General Budanov, and others have been warning. Ukraine is simply the physical front line of what this Russian fascism is all about. And Russian fascism is about terrorizing civilian populations in order to carry out genocidal actions through any means necessary against those they believe should fall under Ruski Mir. And those who wouldn't fall under Ruski Mir are going to be marked for elimination. We saw in Latin America, Hezbollah flies in, gets captured in Argentina, this is 2024, by the Argentinian police utilizing passports from where? Russia's ally, Venezuela. So terrorism is already rearing its head in the Americas. It just doesn't get the play because, again, Russia creates this chaos to hide within. And so moving forward, what we can expect, unfortunately, to answer your question clearly, is death at the hands of Russians unless we are able to step up as a global community and make certain that the Russian fascism is not able to move past Ukraine and, in fact, is pushed out of Ukraine.
Is this an issue that's at all addressed in the election campaign?
You mean the EU elections, or?
Oh no, sorry, no, because
elections.
you're speaking about America, and I'm just thinking about America in the American.
I'm certain. I believe Senator Schumer is bringing up another immigration bill, which would help address issues such as this. In 2021, 4,000 Russians were encountered at the southern border of the United States. In the fiscal year 2023, 53,000. So we are seeing an exponential increase. The same with Venezuelans coming through. And we also see Russia's main ally in the Americas, Nicaragua, basically opening up their visa program to allow anybody who wants to flood into the Americas to do so. So yes, it will be an issue in the American elections, but luckily the United States, along with Ukraine, Poland, and others, are aware of just who the Russians are. And now it's up to all of us to make certain that the Russian fascism is stopped, not just here in Europe, but across the world.
Well, now, finally, you know, once these people make it into the United States, then what? What's next? Do we have any concrete, say, examples of acts of sabotage, or, I mean, what would be their goals?
Networks.
It wouldn't be for me to speak on behalf of the United States or even on behalf of Ukraine, because I'm sitting here as a non-commissioned officer in the Armed Forces of Ukraine. What I can say is that there is absolutely no doubt that there are terror cells operating in the United States, as there are terror cells operating across the world through those who hate freedom and who hate liberty. And who's the #1 purveyor of hatred of liberty and freedom today? The Russian fascist, led by the illegitimate dictator of Russia, so-called President Vladimir Putin.
Well, something to definitely keep our eyes on, and actually one you wouldn't normally expect. You know, irregular migration through the southern border, supported by Russia. We've seen it here in Poland. We've seen it across our borders in the Baltics as well.
The Russians are everywhere, indeed.
All right. Well, Sarah Ashton-Cirillo, Sergeant Sarah Ashton-Cirillo, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate your insight.
Slava Ukraini, and thanks for having me.
Herom Slava.